Hey everyone, welcome to Sidetrack Adventures. This is Steve. Right now we are just east of Barstow, California, and this dirt road behind me travels about 50 miles across the desert as it makes its way towards Palmdale. The problem is, it shouldn't exist. Nobody knows who built it, and nobody knows when it was created. And to make matters more interesting, about halfway down the road, there are the ruins of a settlement that nobody knows the history of. Well, today we're going to head down the Barstow-Palmdale Road and try and unravel some of its mysteries. We are starting out today right off State Route 58, outside of Hinckley, California. Through this part of the Mojave, the road that we'll be taking today is officially known as IM 4800, with the IM for the Iron Mountain District. This road travels in an almost perfectly straight line across the desert, stretching from here towards Palmdale, about 55 miles away as the crow flies. But here's the strange part. If you open Google Maps and actually plug in the directions from here to Palmdale, you won't get a direct route, not even close. Instead, you're sent on a long detour, nearly 80 miles, well over an hour and a half of driving. Meanwhile, this road, this dead straight line, is just sitting here, slicing across the Mojave like someone drew it with a ruler and then simply walked away. And that's where the mystery deepens. This road is different from the usual forgotten desert tracks or old mining routes. No one seems to know exactly when it was built or for what purpose. Grading a straight line like this for nearly 50 miles is no small feat, even out here where the desert looks flat. Anyone who has spent any time in the Mojave knows it only looks flat from a distance. Up close there are hidden ridges, washes, basalt flows, and sandy stretches that are very easy to get stuck in. So to make a perfectly straight line across the desert, whoever built this put in serious effort. But why? I first learned of this road while reading an article about Route 466 on the Explorer Kingman website of all places. That one little paragraph about it was enough to get me to go down the rabbit hole and try to find more info about this road. Then I come to find out there are the ruins of a named settlement about midway along the road that once again no one seems to know the history of. They already had me at Mystery Road, but adding that in, I knew I had to come out here. While Google won't give you directions on it, when you look at the road on a satellite view, you could just see it going on and on and on in a straight line towards Palmdale. Of course, roads don't just appear in the Mojave. They always have a story. Military routes, mining supply lines, early county projects, old ranch access roads, or sometimes even planned highways that never happened. So the question becomes, who built this, and what were they trying to do? Hopefully as we drive it today, we can start to unravel some of the mystery. People have come up with a number of theories over the years, and keep in mind, none of these are confirmed. That's what makes the road so interesting. It's one of those Mojave puzzles that refuses to give you a straight answer, even though the road itself is as straight as they come. I just stopped to check out this flat, rocky area. We've passed a few areas that look just like this, and all on the left side of the road for whatever reason. I'm trying to figure out if this is natural or man-made. One theory about this road is that it was supposed to be a utility corridor, meant for power lines, telephone lines, or even a gas pipeline. The Mojave is full of these long, straight utility roads. There is some evidence for this. On some old maps, this is listed as a telephone road. That makes a lot of sense, but the mystery's not quite solved yet. The trouble is, there's no supporting evidence, such as old pole footings out here. At least so far, there's nothing to indicate that there was ever anything alongside this road. Speaking of utilities, here they are crossing the road, not going alongside it. I think if there was ever anything out here like this going alongside the road, we would see some evidence of it. Every time you find an old desert route like this, some folks will claim it was once a stagecoach road or an early settler route. It's a fun idea, and there were early wagon roads across the Mojave, but this theory falls apart pretty quickly. First, stagecoach roads were never this straight. They had to follow the terrain, weaving around washes, hugging ridgelines, avoiding deep sand, and sticking near water sources or ranch stops. This road does the opposite. It ignores the terrain entirely. It plows straight over rises and straight through shallow basins, the way only 20th century machinery could. There also weren't any stage stops or ranches along this alignment in the 1800s, which stage routes depended on. Also, this road doesn't appear on any topographic maps until 1943. If it was a stagecoach road, while it's possible surveyors could have missed some of it, they wouldn't have missed all of it. So the old wagon road theory is a fun idea, but it doesn't match the construction, the alignment, or the history. We just came to an intersection and there's a sign here, so we figured let's stop and see if the sign has any information for us. Well, unfortunately, this isn't going to be any help today. There was another marker over here. So it looks like this road that we're crossing over does have a pipeline going under it or along it. There are warnings for it on both sides of the road. And from this road marker here, we can see the road is now KH 4800. The KH stands for Kramer Hills. So getting back to the theories on the origins of this road, surveyors in the 1920s and 30s would sometimes cut extremely straight lines across the desert as reference baselines, especially when establishing township and range borders for county mapping. Some of these lines were later widened into usable roads by ranchers, miners, or utility crews. The problem is, this road doesn't follow those old section and range boundaries, the 1-mile squares that make up most maps of the western United States. A true section line runs north-south or east-west and makes 90-degree turns at correction lines. This road does none of that. It just slices diagonally right across the survey grid, ignoring every boundary. That tells us something important. Whoever built this wasn't following normal county survey work. They were following their own line. This section of the desert has been pretty empty so far and hasn't offered a lot of clues yet. Well, there hasn't been much out here yet, but I just noticed something on the side of the road here. It looks like there's some sort of post or something right here. And there are some wires here as well. Aside from this, there isn't a whole lot here. There's a few other pieces of wood laying around. There could have been a small homestead or something here. Back in the 1930s up until I think the 1970s, there was a thing called the Small Tract Act, where people could lease land from the government. They just had to improve upon it. But it's kind of hard to say for certain. Aside from that post and a few wires and a few other random pieces of wood, it's pretty barren out here. There is at least one other post out in front of us, and we'll walk over and check that out and see if that's anything. But other than that, whatever was here, they did a pretty good job of cleaning it up, because there is not much of it left. But if I had to guess, I would say that there was probably a homestead here under the Small Tract Act. Most of those homesteads didn't last long because, as you could probably imagine, it's not easy to live out here. Whatever it was, aside from these few posts, there is nothing else out here. One of the most common ideas floating around is that this was meant to be part of a major state highway, something that would have directly connected Barstow to the Antelope Valley. In the 1930s through the 1960s, California surveyed dozens of proposed highways that never got built, and the desert was full of these plans. One of these roads was supposed to be State Route 122, which was planned in the 1960s and would have cut across this section of the desert. The only trouble with that theory is that the alignment of the proposed State Route 122 doesn't quite line up with this road, and as I mentioned earlier, there is evidence of this road dating back at least 2 decades before that. The area we're passing through now, if you look on Google Maps, it has streets and a grid that looks like it should be a neighborhood, but aside from the dirt roads, nothing is really out here. This area has always attracted big dreams, and sometimes some very questionable ones. Throughout the 1950s and 60s, developers were carving up huge tracts of desert land into paper towns, places that existed on maps long before anyone ever built a road, a house, or even bothered to put in utilities. A lot of times people would buy land sight unseen, never realizing they were buying land without water, without services, and often without any real chance of ever being developed. That's why you sometimes find perfectly straight roads that lead to nowhere, or isolated grids that look like ghost towns that never even got the chance to be towns. Sometimes the roads were just graded to make the land look more appealing on a brochure. No developer trying to sell plots of land in the desert was going to go through the trouble of creating a road the length of this one, though. I just noticed this off in the distance, so I wanted to make a quick stop. This has nothing to do with the road itself, but it looks like at some point there were greenhouses right here. You can see all the trash and everything that was left behind. Now, why would there be greenhouses out here in the middle of nowhere, with no easy access, pretty much hidden from everybody? Well, it's not that hard to guess. You can see some of the pipes here where they had a water system. Illegal pot farms have been a serious problem out here in the Mojave. Now, I'm just speculating on what this was. I mean, of course, this could have always been a strawberry farm or something. I don't know why you'd want to grow strawberries out in the middle of nowhere, far from any easily accessible road. But let's be real, this probably wasn't a strawberry farm. whatever was going on right here, it looks like they had a pretty big operation. I just hate to see something like this. I mean, just look at the mess that's left over afterwards. And these are our public lands. Spots like that are frustrating because of the damage it does. Plus, it's a reminder that one wrong turn and you could run into something out here way worse than any snake. But anyways, let's keep following this line and get back to trying to figure this road out. For the first time since starting the drive, we're going to be crossing a paved road. This is Highway 395. And if you look on the other side of the highway, you could see this road just continuing on, still in a perfectly straight line. While the western section of this road is fully drivable, the section closer to Palmdale has been broken up, and parts of it have all but disappeared. And that actually adds to the mystery somewhat. When researching the road, I came across a YouTube video by Karma Frog 1, where he looked at old aerial photos of the area. The earliest aerials date to 1948, and by then parts of the road had already been plowed over. Since the road first shows up on topographical maps in 1943, and by 1948 it was already broken up, it wasn't in use very long. And of course, there just so happened to be a major world event going on at the time the road seems to have been built. Now that we've crossed Highway 395, we're actually starting to see a few Joshua trees. Not too many of them, though. So here's a theory that actually fits a lot of clues. The Mojave Desert is full of forgotten military roads. Hundreds of them, built quickly during World War II and the early Cold War. These roads rarely show up in modern county records because they were never civilian projects to begin with. This perfectly straight line just happens to run through the R-2508 Restricted Military Airspace, which covers Edwards Air Force Base, China Lake, and Fort Irwin. During the 1940s through the 1960s, this whole region was being carved up by engineers, testing things such as radar systems and experimental aircraft. Straight lines were extremely valuable for those operations. A 40 or 50 mile baseline could have been used for any number of things: radar calibration, optical tracking, convoy training, emergency transport, or even early ground support for jet testing. A road like this would absolutely have been built outside the normal grid, because military engineers weren't following county survey rules. They followed their own azimuth, a straight bearing, mile after mile. Plus, more than anything, this road would have made a straight shot from the Army Air Force Base to the railroad depots at Barstow. To me, all the circumstantial evidence points to the military building this road. It's not proof, but it lines up better than almost any other explanation. Okay, we're off the road a little ways again, and there's an old barbed wire fence here. So I made absolutely sure that this place was abandoned before we stopped, and you'll see why in just a minute, but I flew the drone over just to make sure that there was nobody around. We are out in the middle of nowhere, and all of a sudden there is a compound with a barbed wire fence, and somebody pushed up all this dirt to make this huge berm. And this dirt wall goes all around this area. Whatever's on the other side, they did not want people to see it. And you could take one guess to guess what's on the other side of this wall. Of course, this dirt wall could have been used as a windbreak or something. I don't know the particulars of growing, let's say, crops out here in the desert. But take a look at all of these greenhouses. This was a pretty major operation. And once again, I don't know for sure what was being grown here. It could have been strawberries, but I doubt it was strawberries. Aside from the mess left behind and the damage done to the desert, think about how much water was used in this operation, especially when there's a water shortage in the state, and especially in this area. If the barbed wire fence and the giant berm weren't enough of a warning, there are also a couple of trash cars out here. Hopefully these weren't the last people to stop and take a look at this place. These could be cars that were stolen, then stripped down and just left out here. This one looks like they took pretty much everything they could. But anyways, let's get out of this place and get back on the road. The destruction out here is just extremely frustrating. I try to show the positives of the places we go, but sometimes you have to show the bad too, or else no one will know about what's going on out here. But anyways, let's hope that's the last one of those we come across. And I will say, if we come across an active one, I will not be stopping, and you will be seeing me drive a lot faster. We've reached Houze Place, which is the only named settlement on the map in between Barstow and Palmdale. And there is nothing else out here. So there was some sort of building right here at some point, and there's all sorts of wood left over from it. But as we get closer, we can see that this is an adobe wall. There isn't much out there on the history of this place, and this adobe wall has led to speculation that this may have been a stagecoach stop or something dating back to the 1800s. But there is a couple of issues with that. The first of which being that this place doesn't show up on any maps until the 1960s. Another issue with this place is, while this adobe wall would indicate that this was pretty old, if we look right over here, and you can see what's left of whatever wooden building was here, but right here, this is concrete underneath it. Adobe buildings weren't usually built on top of concrete. And you can also see that this concrete does not date to the 1800s. So there is no chance that this building was a stagecoach station. Taking a closer look, it's kind of hard to tell if the concrete actually goes under the adobe or not. So it's always possible that this could have been an addition to the adobe building that was added on later. Still, there were no known stagecoach stops here. I had looked to see if there were any dates written in the concrete, but Unfortunately, I couldn't find anything. Now, I can't imagine why you'd want to build something out of adobe if you had modern building materials available. The adobe building may predate everything else here. There may have been a ranch or something here at some point. But the first time this place shows up on the map isn't until the 1960s. And the building in front of us looks like it would have came from that 1960s time period. I looked around online and nobody seems to know anything about this place, its history, who it's named after, pretty much anything. So I did some digging, and well, at least as far as this place goes, we have some answers. And check out this truck. This actually looks to be in better condition than those two cars we saw at those greenhouses. This looks like it was a pretty big house at one point, and I believe that's all it was a house. And over here is probably where they stored their water. So, not being able to find any information on this place online, I went ahead and got the property records. And wow, it looks like this wall has been all shot up. This property was owned by Jesse and Lillian Houze until Jesse died in 1973. Jesse was African American, and he was a lieutenant in World War II. It looks like skaters have built a skate ramp in the garage. I don't think this was here when the house was built. But, yeah, it looks like they had a two-car garage. And this was probably the bathroom. And it looks like they did have electricity out here. Now, I wasn't able to pinpoint when exactly they acquired the property, but I believe it would have been sometime in the early 1960s. And that lines up with it starting to show up on the maps in the 1960s as well. Oh, and it had two fireplaces. Now, here's kind of the interesting thing. Who did they acquire the land from? The Pacific Telephone and Telegraph Company. So it looks like at some point, the telephone company did own at least some of the land along this road. And then by the early 1960s, they started getting rid of it. With those pipes up there, it looks like they may have had a second floor on this building. After Jesse died in 1973, they were in debt, but I couldn't figure out who the land was then transferred to. Most of the land out here is public land, but this is still listed as a private inholding. We're starting to get closer to the area where the road gets broken up and we won't be able to fully drive it anymore. But if the Houses bought their land from the telephone company, that does somewhat support that this was a utility road. But I still think that the road was built by the military. Now, of course, this is just my theory, nothing's confirmed, but I believe that the military built this road during World War II. Everything seems to line up perfectly with the military building it. And then afterwards, it was later acquired by the telephone company. An already constructed, straight road like this would have been perfect if they were going to put up telephone lines in between Palmdale and Barstow. But then at some point, the telephone company decided they weren't going to put up a line and started getting rid of some of the land. But hey, the mystery is part of the fun of being out here. And whatever it was created for a road that shouldn't exist, it's a pretty fun way to cross the Mojave Desert. We've just reached the Butte Valley Wildlife Sanctuary, and the road would have continued straight through here. And as a matter of fact, if we just head to the other side of this sign, we can still make out the road cutting through the wildlife sanctuary. And you can still see it just heading way off into the distance, still perfectly straight. On the other side of the wildlife sanctuary, there are parts of the road that are still drivable again. But we're going to end our journey on the road here, because about a mile or two from here, there's something pretty cool that I think's a good place to end this video. We're about 2 miles from the wildlife sanctuary, and we're at a pretty famous movie location. This church is famous for its appearance in the movie Crossroads with Britney Spears, and also a little movie called Kill Bill. This is, of course, the church where they have the massacre at Uma Thurman's wedding in Kill Bill, and on Google Maps it's even listed as Kill Bill Church. We just happened to be taking video outside, and the pastor came by and asked us if we wanted a tour, and of course we said yes. So this is pretty cool. We get to see inside the church. Now this is an actual church now. This building actually dates back to 1902, and originally it was just a town hall, a meeting place, a dance hall, and then in the 1970s Hollywood came and built the facade of the church on the outside. Quite a few movies have been filmed here, but at some point it got turned into an actual Seventh-day Adventist church. They have actual services here. Even though this was the site of a bloody massacre in Kill Bill, the pastor told me that in recent years they've been more selective on what they allow to be filmed here. This is after a Cardi B video was filmed here, and the song had offensive lyrics. So that's our look at the mysterious Barstow-Palmdale Road. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and we'll see you next week.